All right, my friends, it is Christmas Eve, December 24th, 2024, and I have 9 big stories for you today. So we're going to start in Turkey, and I know we keep talking about Turkey, but it's relevant. Ukraine needs a stable and peaceful post-Assad Syria, Zelensky says. The Ukrainian president reaffirmed Ukraine's commitment to providing grain as humanitarian aid to Syria, aiming to bolster food security and promote stability. Well, why is he doing that? What about the Russians? Weren't the Russians there? Well, they've cut and run. So, as long as Assad was a useful ally, okay. Now that Assad's not there, they're not going to deliver grain either. Ukraine will pick up the food supplies to Syria, which have stopped from Russia after the Russian puppet Assad has been toppled. This alone shows that Moscow has no use for peoples or friendships, only for puppets it can control, and once this expires, they let them fail. And that analysis seems pretty fair. Now, let's look at HTS. Now, we have to keep an eye on whether HTS is going to fight with the SDF. The SDF are the Kurds up in the northeast, backed by the Americans. And the Kurds actually have 10,000 or some odd former ISIS fighters in jail. And if they get sprung, you have a whole new ISIS caliphate springing up again, and the U.S. does not want that to happen by any means. Now, HTS-led Syrian interim government stated it will discuss mechanisms for disarming and dissolving the U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces, according to unspecified SDF sources. So if that takes place, you could very well see another civil war in Syria. Hopefully that won't happen. Hopefully cooler heads will prevail and they'll work something out. The new Syrian authorities officially declare a Catholic Christmas a public holiday, with government offices closed on December 25th and 26th. So that's a positive sign that maybe they are going to try to work together. Okay, meanwhile, I saw this. This was from Steve Rosenberg in the BBC, and what they said in a Russian newspaper I found shocking. Listen to this.
On recent events in Syria, the collapse of Bashar al-Assad's regime towards the end of the year has confirmed once again the indisputable fact that the percentage of votes won by a dictator, autocrat, usurper at an election before he falls from power means absolutely nothing. None of that 95% support came out to defend Assad. And he defended.
Wow. Now, he was speaking in the terms of what happened to Assad, but that's kind of what was going on with Putin. And that he said that is actually shocking. And I hope he didn't put his name on that article. Okay, let's shift gears to the next big story. The Iraqi federal government is reconsidering its request for U.S. forces to withdraw from Iraq by the end of 2026 because it's concerned that the fall of Bashar al-Assad in Syria threatened Iraqi security. So things have changed significantly because of Syria. Let's turn our attention to Europe now. Moldovan president has been sworn in for her second term. Sandu also gave a speech in which she noted that society has managed to maintain peace and protect its democracy in spite of everything that Russia was doing. But in spite of that, what was Russia doing? Moldovan officials had warned for months of threats from Russia that included disinformation, facilitating millions of illicit payments for an informal network of anti-EU organizers. Yep, they've been doing this. This is their hybrid warfare. Okay, protest in Slovakia, turning our attention to another big story. After their prime minister, Robert Fico, humiliated the country going to visit Putin. Well, I don't understand why he wants to be on Putin's side as opposed to the EU side, given where he is. But Zelensky even said that he offered Fico compensation for cutting off Russian gas supplies through Ukraine. But Fico refused. Quote, we offered him solutions regarding potential compensation for Slovaks, the Slovaks specifically, for losses from Russian transit, as well as alternatives for transit, any other gas, not Russian, at the request of the European Commission. Fico did not want compensation for the Slovaks. He does not want to cooperate with the European Commission. For some reason, he finds Moscow more profitable. I don't understand it, but he's placed his bets on Putin as opposed to the EU. Okay, Darth Putin, the parody site, said, don't be silly. We only impose Western imperialism. All other imperialism is to be appeased. And yeah, that's kind of the way that they've been acting, as if that's it. Meanwhile, Italy is extending military aid to Ukraine through 2025. Prime Minister Meloni's cabinet prolonged the authorization for the transfer of military vehicles, materials, and other equipment. So thank you to Italy. The Telegraph was talking about, hey, she's somebody who gets it. In fact, this comment here was Maloney is one of the few right-wingers who understands the root of the problem. Maloney is on the right side of the political spectrum, and this is from the Telegraph. Georgina Maloney accused Russia of orchestrating illegal migration into Europe to destabilize the bloc, as she called for stronger defense of the bloc's eastern and southern flanks. Now, migration is an issue in a number of European countries, and other Europeans can speak to this much better than I can in that context. But generally speaking, it's seen as the parties that are saying, hey, we got to stop this migration tend to be from the right. But Maloney's actually pointing at, look, this is Russia trying to push this kind of thing. Ask Finland about it. Finland had to close its borders. Okay, it's reopened its borders, but a number of times Finland closed its borders. Okay, this is Senator Wicker. The U.S. Helsinki Commission posted at Senator Wicker, I call on the Biden administration to sanction the leaders of the Georgian Dream Party. So we're on to the next thing. And Georgian Dream, like the Georgian people are still out there protesting day over day. Good on them. Okay, big story yesterday into today is this. A sanctioned Russian cargo ship owned by a proxy for Russia's defense ministry sank yesterday off the coast of Spain after an explosion in the engine room. Could this be the beginning of a trend? Well, I think there might be something to it. Now, the tankers that sunk in the Kursk, the oil tankers, there wasn't an explosion involved, and they just sank because they were poorly maintained. And this was not the Russian Sparta, the ship that we were talking about yesterday, used to transport weapons from Syria. That broke down off the Portugal coast. That's not the same ship, so it's a different one. But there's a lot of breakdowns here. Now, back to the same ship, the Ursula Major. It sank in the Mediterranean Sea, not far from Gibraltar. After a reported explosion in the engine room, the ship was under U.S. sanctions from 2022 for weapon supplies to Russian military in Syria. The ship sank during a voyage from St. Petersburg, and it's going all the way around to Vladivostok. On board was cargo, 2 heavy port cranes, each weighing 380 tons, and with a lifting capacity of 350 tons. Together, they could lift an object weighing 600 tons, and in addition, on board were 45-ton hatch covers for new icebreakers. So that ship is now at the bottom of the Med. Okay, the Russians are not happy about this. Here is what they were saying in Telegram channels, and the translation is this. For context, the loss of the Ursula Major, this was the flagship of a private fleet and the largest vessel in its lineup. There simply isn't a larger universal Ro-Ro Lolo class cargo ship capable of horizontal and vertical loading. Along with the ship, the cranes destined for Vladivostok terminal and luxury hatches for icebreakers went to the bottom. Ursula Major's task in the Far East was to fulfill state objectives related to developing port infrastructure and the northern sea route, which are now quite evidently disrupted. So the Russians want to build this sea route through the Arctic as another way to get their oil out and gas and that sort of thing. And this is just another indication of their ongoing aggression. Okay, Andrew Perpetua said Russian bases exploding, Russian oil thingies burning, Russian ships sinking. And then he said it comes to the old adage, if you want to deal with global warming, the best way is to quickly destroy the nearest dictator. Yeah, because these things keep happening because of Putin's aggression. Okay, now speaking of Putin's aggression, this is freaking huge. I can't explain just how huge this is. This is the most important thing that has happened geopolitically in a long, long time. Now remember, the Russians secured this deal with the North Koreans where if you're attacked, North Korea will come to your aid, and if we're attacked, North Korea will come to Russia's aid. And I said when that concluded, it'll be really bad if Russia does another one of these deals with Iran, and it'll be terrible if they do one with China. Well, it looks like they're about to do one with Iran. Let's look at this. Putin continued making the axis of evil stronger. Russia and Iran announced that they plan to sign a comprehensive agreement on January 19th. What? So they are going to do that? So Anna from Ukraine called it. In one of our conversations, she said, this isn't the Ukrainian war. This is the Russia, North Korea, Iran, China war, and we should call it that. Now, in her training, she's a linguist, so that made sense to her, and I had never heard that before, but that's spot on. The date is also really interesting here, January 19th. So they're going to conclude this the last day that Biden is in office and just a day before Trump takes office. There have been numerous forecasts that this will mean Iran's full access to Russian nuclear technologies. Ooh, Trump's going to hate that. And getting new types of weapons, will Russia sign on to defend Iran's territory and vice versa? Now, if you don't know the background, Trump's really hot and bothered about the Iranians. Whatever he thinks about Russia, the Iranians, they really tick him off. And now, if Putin is aligning with Iran, that might be Putin's biggest geopolitical mistake since the war began, because now the possibility has shrunk significantly that Trump will give Putin a good deal. The possible date to sign this agreement has been chosen deliberately, a day before Trump's inauguration. Will that impact Trump wanting a meeting with Putin? I think that from the perspective of what's best for Russia, this was the worst possible thing that Putin could have done. I think this is great for Ukraine and terrible for Russia. Michael McKay, I highlight his work in the Daily Brief very often, said the United States and his allies have institutionalized cowardice. This is a fatal weakness given fascist Russia's global war against Western civilization. Ukraine defends the West with courage and wisdom. Ukrainians are the only fighters in the vanguard in humanity. But now Trump, he's going to have a different perspective. And I was just watching Michael Waltz talk with Ben Shapiro. Michael Waltz is the incoming replacement for Jake Sullivan, and he does not have anywhere near the same perspective that Jake Sullivan has, especially not about Iran and the Middle East, even about Ukraine and the way that he might deal with Ukraine. Now, Zelensky said 2 years ago, as the Russians retreated, they kidnapped 48 children. None of them were even 3 years old. Most of these children were forcibly relocated deeper into occupied territory, to Crimea, while others were deported to Russia. Ukrainian children are not toys, although it seems that for Russian elites and officials they are. Behind each of these children is a life that must not be lost, a future that must not be ruined. So imagine that. Imagine you were kidnapped at age 1 or 2.
One day you discover that your whole life has been a lie. Your name, your language, your traditions, your very identity don't belong to you. They were stolen before you could even remember them. It sounds like an unreal nightmare. But Russia has made it a reality for dozens of children from the Kherson Children's Home. In February 2022, Russian troops occupied Kherson, seizing Kherson Children's Home as well. At the time, 53 little Ukrainian orphans and children deprived of parental care were living there. All were under the age of 3. After the invasion and relentless shelling, the basement of a local church became a temporary refuge for the children. But in late April, the FSB tracked them down. A few months later, delegations from Russia arrived to sort through the children and select some for deportation. Among them was 10-month-old Margarita Prokopenko. On the pretext of a fake medical diagnosis, she was deported, separated from her brother Maxim and transferred to Moscow. There, Margarita was illegally adopted by a Russian MP and his wife, and forged her documents. Russia erased her identity. The remaining children were taken by the Russian forces to occupied Crimea.
And I wish I could tell you it was only 48, but this is just this one incident. This is what they've done. And this is why it's important that you support Ukraine. And my friends, the Guardian Angel UAV drone campaign is still going on. If you wish to donate, please do. The links below, and we will close as of midnight Eastern Standard Time in the United States on Christmas Day. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.